Governor Uba Sani of Kaduna State has said that poverty and economic exclusion are the root causes of insecurity in northern Nigeria, warning that unless they are addressed holistically, the region will continue to face unrest. Sani said his administration began with a data-driven focus on poverty and underdevelopment, drawing on his experience as the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Banking. According to him, more than 60 to 65% of people in the northern region, especially in the northwest, were financially excluded when he assumed office. This, he said, made many young people vulnerable to recruitment by armed groups. And now to discuss this, we're joined by former National Coordinator, Middle Belt Patriots, Zariyi Yusuf, and also Public Affairs Analyst, Ismail Auwal. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on. Multidimensional poverty, very prevalent in northern Nigeria. How does this contribute directly or indirectly to the rising insecurity numbers that we're seeing, such as banditry, kidnapping, and terrorism? Let me start with you, Mr. Yusuf.
Well, thank you so much. I must say it's a privilege to be here once again. Trying to find a common ground between unemployment, say what you rightly put as multidimensional poverty, which one will not argue has actually eaten deep into this region of the country, but then trying to balance that with what we would refer to as insecurity as far as Nigeria is concerned today. I do not think it x-rays the problem we are dealing with. The simple reason is because multidimensional poverty is not a sole reserve of the northern part of the country. Unemployment, economic exclusion, or whatsoever it is. When you particularly itemize these issues, you would discover that there might actually be certain other groups who should have had a justification or whatsoever to engage in criminalities or in terrorism or in basically what has accounted for most of what we would term as insecurity. We are not talking about social vices such as snatching of phones. We are not talking about maybe burgling homes when people have gone to work and all of that. We are dealing with an organized, well-armed group, basically, whose sole motivation is ideological in a way. So while we will not argue that unemployment, political exclusion could actually make people in a way susceptible to joining all kinds of criminalities, but the subject of insecurity in Nigeria cannot basically be traced to let's say what we refer to as poverty. I don't know, but in Nigeria, actually, as a country, our conventional army has not primarily engaged in any conventional war in the past decade, other than the counter-insurgency measures. It's important to ask: have we ever employed any technology such as the use of armed drones? We've never done that. So when you look at I'd say the sophistication of what basically accounts for insecurity, it is not something we could connect with basically poverty or economic exclusion.
All right.
Unfortunately,
let me
come. Other reasons, yes.
Right. Let me come to Mr. Ismail Auwal and ask. I mean, the role of youth and unemployment is one factor that we have to look at in this escalating violence and extremism in the region. Can there be an intersection between the two, that youth unemployment in the north is also part of the reason that is driving the escalating violence and extremism in the region as well?
Well, thank you very much for having me once again. I actually belong to the school of thought that believes that security is an economic variable. And if we agree that security is an economic variable, then we definitely believe that issues like unemployment, just like you mentioned, provide poverty, lack of education, provides a fertile ground for violent groups actually to grow in any particular region, not only in Nigeria and not in Africa, everywhere in the world. If you look at the subject is Kaduna. Look at the the poverty index of Kaduna. Then look at also the rate of unemployment in Kaduna. So I actually believe that poverty, unemployment, of course, if we are talking about unemployment, at the end, unemployment will cycle back to poverty, because when you're unemployed, you're going to be poor. And we all know that man must eat. And if somebody cannot find a means to provide for himself and for his family, unless if there's a very strong restraint, or that person is educated, which also is very unlikely, because you see poverty and a lack of education rather are interconnected. So I actually believe that poverty and unemployment provide a fertile ground for these terrorists to employ or to recruit young people, which at the long run fuels insecurity in the northwest and northeastern region of Nigeria.
All right. Mr. Yusuf, Zariyi Yusuf, earlier you were saying that, Nigeria has, in spite of their concerted efforts when it comes to insurgency, the fight against insurgency and insecurity in the north, there are still other parts that are left behind, and one of them is the fight against drug proliferation and small arms. And so I do have to ask, do you think that decentralization or more state-level autonomy could help tackle the poverty-security nexus more effectively?
Well, yes. Before I could directly address that question, I would want to just emphasize again that the problem of insecurity in Nigeria is ideological, basically. It's just an issue we would have to come to terms with, because if we do not come to terms with it, we would misdiagnose it. We would go politically correct about it. When Boko Haram first emerged, they said its economics is hardship and all of that. The economic hardship in the northeast is the same you find in the north-south and all of that. Of the last couple of months, I think the death toll, I would say, in any conflict that kills civilians on the African continent kept happening on the plateau. Basically, would we say it's because of economic hardship when people go to farms and they can't access it again and all of that? So there is a serious ideological issue, and that would be Islamism, which basically it's all kinds of people that stand against it. So if we want to tie that to poverty, it will look as if once we are able to solve that, then it simply means we cannot have we would not have that security challenge, which basically is not true. But with regards to decentralizing and having state policing, I think one of the reasons why I think there have been conversations in that line before now, but you would realize, I don't know if it's from the state governments or from the federal government, but there seems to be a certain kind of reluctance. And if you would go by, I think an interview the boss of the DSS granted at some point, I think it came from a good understanding that whether we accept it or not, the pattern of warfare that is being waged against the military, against civilians, is not the conventional kind that we could say the military will go in and engage. So there would be the great necessity, there is that necessity for the approach to be local. So yes, decentralizing will help deal with the challenge. But unless we come to terms with the fact that we are dealing with a satanic ideology that would have nothing to do with whether the economic issues in the country are solved or not, we will just be beating around the bush. And like I said, the employment of AK-47, rocket-propelled grenades, armed drones, and all of that is definitely not a conflict or a form of insecurity that we could connect with poverty. It's a different kind of ideology, and well, maybe as a symptom, money could be used, to entice people into it, but at the core of it, it's not poverty. And decentralizing the security.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right, I was going to ask Ismail if he also toes the same thought line as you do regarding insecurity, that in the north, one of the key cause of it, or the contributing factor that we're seeing here and we're all overlooking, is the ideology as an ideological issue in the north. Do you agree that it's religion?
100%. I actually agree with Zariyi Yusuf. 100% is I agree. It's ideological problem. Of course, when you look at if you go look at how Boko Haram started, we are definitely not going to say Muhammad Yusuf started Boko Haram because he is poor. Muhammad Yusuf was not poor. But the point here is that's why during my first I mentioned fuel. What poverty and unemployment does to insecurity is. It's like it adds fuels to it. It make it like there's an appeal for I agree. There is issue of ideology, and that's why Northern Nigeria provides a fertile ground for insecurity to grow. So I 100% agree. There is an ideological problem tied to Boko Haram.
All right. I mean, gentlemen, gentlemen, I wish we could continue, but this is where we have to close the curtain. There's so much that's going on in the north, and we do hope that conversations like this would continue, and also leaders, or when I mean by leader, I mean the ruling elite of the north will come together and start to discuss and not really shy away from what really is the issue in the north. I must say thank you to you, Ismail Auwal, and also to you as well, Zariyi Yusuf, for taking out the time to join us.